I'm going to invite one of our editors, Emily Moon, to offer a land acknowledgement as we get going.
Are we ready now?
I think so. Let's do it.
Okay. Please join us in acknowledgement of the lands we gather on today. If you would like, you are invited to offer reverence to the First Nations where you are by typing your location and their names in the chat. We are curating this conversation from Portland, Oregon, traditional and ancestral lands stolen from the Multnomah, Clackamas, Chinook, Cathlamet, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes and bands of the Columbia and Willamette regions. We respect that acknowledging Indigenous people as the original stewards of these lands since time immemorial is not enough. Action and investment are required. May this recognition seed communal roots of active engagement and relationship building toward healing the ongoing harms and traumas of settler colonialism.
Thanks so much for that, Emily. We are First Matter Press, and you're joining our Convos in Cohort event today. And First Matter Press is a writers collective in Portland, Oregon, founded in 2018 to dissolve publication barriers for first-time publishing poets and genre-expanding writers. And we currently have 17 titles available or in production. We're adding 5 new authors to our roster this year. And we have an annual release of books where we invite authors into Cohort, where they crystallize their manuscripts in dialogue with one another and with our editors. And they also get the chance to collaborate with a featured cover artist each year on original cover art. Our press is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our authors maintain 100% of copyrights and sales royalties for their work. And currently, our editors include Ash Good, Lauren Paradis, Caroline Wilcox-Rule, and Emily Moon. Our Convos and Cohort series began last year, and we are excited to continue this new tradition with our 5 publishing authors for 2022. We'll get more into their books and titles as we go throughout this program today, but on this screen, I just want to give a little bit of a shout out to our featured cover artist for this year, Rachel Mulder, who was a joy to work with and just really knocked it out of the park with all of these spectacular original designs here. And Rachel is a really active artist, and she's on Instagram. You can find her on Patreon. She sends postcards out. She's really great. She's a Portland artist, and I encourage you to go and look her up and support her work if you are intrigued by these cover designs, because her art goes in a lot of different directions. And then I also just want to acknowledge that one of our authors, Sonya Wohletz, is traveling abroad tonight, so she won't be part of this conversation, but we hope you come back in July and Sonya shall be here then, so we'll have the full circle in conversation. So tonight, our theme for Convos and Cohort is claiming yourself through storytelling. And one of the things that we kind of delightfully find as a press as we invite these authors to come together is that even though they usually don't know each other when they're working on these manuscripts, we start to find these really interesting overlaps and themes that kind of co-emerge through all of the work together. So that's one of the really great things about Convos and Cohort is we get this opportunity to hear the authors speak to those overlaps and read their work and kind of get to see the work through the lens of community, which is really important to us. From here, we're going to head into our readings, and I'll introduce our first author, Ahuva. But before I do that, I just want to do a little lay of the land. If you're here in the Zoom with us, feel free to give a little love as people are reading, either through the emoji apps or reflecting lines back in the chat, or a little bit of kind of miming in Zoom goes a long way if you want to snap some people up or give some thumbs up. Definitely all of those are welcome. So Ahuva S. Zaslavsky was born and raised in Tel Aviv, Israel, and moved to Portland, Oregon in 2010. In her work, she explores themes of memory and trauma in cultural and domestic contexts through mediums including writing, painting, printing, and sculpting. Her visual art has been shown in regional and national galleries, and she has been a visiting artist at Crow Shadow, Oregon, and is currently a docent at the Jewish Museum in Portland. Ahuva's work, Between These Borders Wanders a Golem, is a hybrid book of poems, flash, and short stories that cast psychic investigations into memory, trauma, and repeated ideas that roam the body. So I'll invite Ahuva to come and share some of her work.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I just have this notification on my screen. Just let me see what it is.
It might be that I was spotlighting you.
Oh, okay. All right. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think you're good.
Okay. Summer gestures. She sat in the familiar back seat of the old orange Volkswagen van. A large adventure book laid wide open on her bare thighs, like an atlas. The window was rolled down, and a blanket of burning sun covered the stripe of her skin. What quickens? The car engine made a loud rattle. Dry, grainy road swung her legs, rubbing them on the 300 grit fabric of the seat ahead of her. The front of the van was foggy. She could barely see the top of the two old heads swinging side to side, clouded in gray smoke. What quickens? Her stringy right arm reached outside with open palm and stretched fingers. She let the summer wind push it back and forth, a broken vein in search of direction. What quickens? The space between her bony fingers opened and closed, and the bright white light came through like lighthouse flashes. She was saving the flies and mosquitoes from tragic windshield death. What quickens? And she was not only saving the bugs from their fate, but also keeping the words from flying off the page, out of her pockets and through the window. What quickens? Her head rested on the headrest. Her dark, long hair romped like an angry willow. The blue sky colored the darkness in her eyes. What quickens? Her hungry mouth was wide open, hoping to swallow each dusty cypress they passed. She greeted every crow that sat on the electric poles with a bow, and they greeted her back in awe. What quickens? And many roads will open and close, and many paths will curve and straighten, and the ochre fields will expand and contract, and the heat will hug and release, and the car will roam, and time will take her home. I will not fuck up this work. I let my mom take care of my beloved cat. There is a passing matter to attend, so I give my cat to my mom to look after. She lives on the other side of the ocean, keep straight across a sea and then another sea, then turn left, and there she lives very far away, and still, out of all the people that could watch my cat, I give her to my mom when she is not good at taking care of things or pets or people. and I still give my cat to her. I tell my mom how to watch my cat, to not let her go because I love my cat and something important came up. I chose to take it upon me. I want to do it. It is so important that I ask my mom to take care of my cat. But then I cannot sleep at night, stay up all nights, worry because my mom cannot take care of things or pets or people. So I cross the ocean and the seas and get there and see my mom sitting in her unfenced and unprotected and unsafe yard with gate burst open wide, holding my cat, choking tight, and she proudly says she has been sitting here the whole time, holding the cat in her chest, to her chest. I burst in tears and I take my cat back home through the seas and the ocean and find out that all the work is fucked up completely because I was not there, and I burst in tears again and cry oceans and seas. I wake up and look around to locate my body in space and take in a heavy breath because of this nightmare or because my cat sleeping on my chest. It is 4 a.m. and dark and dry inside and pouring rain outside. And I know it was a dream because there is no way I will cross oceans and seas to give my cat to my mom to look after. She just cannot take care of things or cats or me. And I will not fuck up this work and wonder why my brain thought I might and made up this silly scenario. I think back about all the times I crossed oceans and seas to fuck up my things because she put me in impossible situations that I could not choose between. The rain stops, the birds wake up, and my cat lifts her weight and now by the window dreams about catching the best bird. I take a light breath. Today should be a good one for me. One, the flushing mechanism is broken, so the water in the tank flows nonstop. I don't flash. The toilet water runs through my head. Your thoughts have sounds. 2, once I shared a room with a snoring friend. I used earplugs to sleep, very effective. No sound came through. Then something scary happened. In the complete silence of the night, friend asleep beside me, I suddenly heard 2 voices urgently conversing in my head. I immediately removed the earplugs to listen, even though I knew it came from inside. It felt so real. Maybe my friend was talking, or maybe I heard a couple arguing or fucking next door. The kinds of things that happen in cheap motel rooms where the separating walls are rice paper. Only outside me, it was deadly silent. I heard my racing heartbeat. Close your eyes. 3, my space heater rumbles, almost a seashell attached to the ear. Kids believe in this stuff, that a whole ocean is trapped in a shell. I don't need one to listen to the ocean. I have a space heater. Maybe a promise of ocean is for kids who've never been. Once I knew a girl who believed the ocean was right behind the mall in her desert town. I never took her there because I couldn't face her disappointment. Pause. 4. Sounds float out of my own shell. I hear things, but I'm not crazy. We want proof that an ocean lives in a seashell or behind a desert mall. Make a story. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much for that, Ahuva. I'll invite Emily Moon to introduce Riley Danvers, our next poet.
Riley Danvers is a bisexual poet living in Portland, Oregon, with her partner, their cat Lester, and corgi Kiki. She graduated in 2016 with her AS in English, and in 2018 with her BA in English literature and writing. Her poetry, fiction, and nonfiction have been published in more than 30 online and printed literary journals and anthologies. Riley graduated with her MFA in creative writing from Willamette University in 2021 and is currently pursuing an MA in literature from Mercy College. Even the Air, Too Heavy, is a vivid navigation through the experience of miscarriage, grief, and the search for healing in text and image blending in experimental and traditional poetic forms.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting local writers, indie writers, and supporting an indie press. It's very important, so I appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to be reading a few poems for you. The first poem is called Dissected. If I cut open my abdomen, would I see your shadow? Or would I find a hollow shape etched in silica glass, floating in a burgundy tide? Are fibers of tissue embedded into my sandcastle walls, or have I formed around your absence? Does my uterus remember your turbulence? Is your shape in my blood a haunted mutation? Or is it memory shape-shifting under the pull of a distant orbit? Maybe this is how hearts reach for what can never be reclaimed. Grief. 1. A. Deep and poignant distress caused by or as if by bereavement. Cold and naked on the bathroom floor, shivering and half wet. Shower fails to calm my tempestuous body, bleeding clotted golf balls, clots that clot the shower drain, ragged iron-tinged breaths. B, a cause of such suffering. Cannot go into the bathroom without hearing the storm that pushed the fetus from my body. Cannot reach for hands never formed. Cannot search for eyes never opened. 2. A. Trouble, annoyance. Wait every day for solitude so I can break. Allow myself to be broken. Daylight keeps me hanging by fists clenched around the ice in my throat. B. Annoying or playful criticism. Undo this muscle memory. Undo the aching arc. Undo the shallow water of my uterus. Find a wind strong enough to carry me from the harbor. C. An unfortunate outcome. Disaster. Try to mend the cracks with kinky sex, with expensive food, with whiskey and weed at night to dull the nightmares, with hiking among mountain trees and long car rides along rivers. Try to hide the evidence, hide the stains on the floor. Try to find a future. Try to write myself into a different story. There is no heartbeat strong enough to cut through barbed wire. D, mishap, misadventure. Taste pretend on my tongue like mildew. Taste smiles in my cheeks like plaster. Taste disdain like mud. Icicles down my throat, piercing what little fight is left in this skin, in these bones. Taste a trail of endings like cysts of carbon and lemon zest. Ten answers without questions. 1. The only sounds that live in this tundra are all the screams my mouth chewed to silence. 2. I must quiet the words that blot themselves on the pages of my dreams. 3. When I sleep, I wander the cemetery of selves frozen in search of unspoken truth. 4. Love can never be fully exhumed. 5. Most days I carry screams under my tongue to remember I have not lost my voice. 6. To love is to be haunted. 7. Sometimes love is a cage. Sometimes the cage is an expedition without a map. 8. There is no remedy for remembering. 9. When the bodies buried in this landscape thaw and awaken, ice and stone will reveal a resurrection. 10. Winter will not last, and the moors will soon open these graves. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, and you're muted.
Xylophone Mykland is a neurodivergent, non-binary, lesbian poet and self-proclaimed special occasion, currently based in Portland, Oregon. When they're not writing poetry, you can find them Googling androgynous outfits, walking dogs, applying for public assistance, and thinking about poetry. Follow them at Xylophone Poetry. Someone I Can Hold Gently is an interrogation in ever-tightening orbits of the deepest relationships and childhood pain that wash over our future selves and the elusive puzzle of self-love.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My book is about other things than just autism, but I decided to compile the 3 poems I have kind of about my journey through an autism diagnosis to read tonight to go kind of with the storytelling theme. So the first one is called You Tell Me You Think I'm Autistic while I'm turn signaling out of an exit-only lane on Highway 1. When I don't listen, your words roll down the windows and become cold, biting air, so I have to listen when you say, I just thought maybe you could be, because your siblings are autistic, right? And your dad. And you don't know when I'm joking. You can't tell when I want you to leave. Last week, my mom said my sister might be, but that I definitely am not. I have to trust my grip or I will crash. You have to understand why I can't listen. My mom said I make friends and talk to strangers, so I must be normal. She called me normal, so I have to believe I can be or I'll crash. You have to understand in order to keep driving, I have to believe I am normal. Synonym for lovable, synonym for good, synonym for you wanting me here. My navigation is off, hasn't shown me the end of this road, so it doesn't exist yet. Weak with the speed, I ask, why didn't you just tell me to leave? Yeah, So that's that one. My book is in 4 parts, and each part is addressed to a different person who has been in my life and whose relationship has been complicated in some way. So that one is written to my first love. And then this next one is written to my best friend. You ask me if I might be autistic. And I ask, like, in a bad way, then apologize. Your soft words build around what you've hypothesized for a long time. I stumble on the last step of my brain's dark staircase, tumbling forward into free online assessments, you holding my other hand. It may be my body, but I did not build it. There are winding side hallways I can only navigate when it's freezing, or the waterlogged floorboards will collapse. The light bulbs inside locked closets burned out a long time ago. I open one, then shut my brother's scream back inside. When I yelled and called him names, he showed me how to love someone like paint, soaking into the walls of this life. You call my name, bring me back into my bedroom body where the laptop is open and the scores are highlighted in yellow. I don't dare ask how you can love me, knowing all the repairs to be done. You answer anyway, promising I'm no flawed construction. I am somewhere to call home. And then this one is from the last section of my book. And it is called An Incomplete Guide to Accepting You Are Autistic. And this one is addressed to myself. In summer, tell your psychiatrist about how the world is too bright and warm and loud. She will casually invert all your memories, refer you to a phone number. After you hang up that video call, remain still. Curl into yourself. Stare at the wall for minutes. You won't know why. You don't have to tell everyone right away. You don't have to tell anyone, actually. Meanwhile, every time you break one of your strategies to be loved, don't talk too much, don't ask weird questions, don't stare, don't leave awkward silences, don't breathe too loudly from your mouth. The moment plays under your eyelids, rubbing fists, seeing stars. Imagine if your apologies weren't on a hair trigger. Leave the party when the music blasts into an ear and tries to escape through your skull. Your mom will call. Don't answer. When you begin thinking through the words to tell her, your mouth drops into your gut. Walk down the stairs and shake the tension from your wrists in time with the steps. Realize you've walked down the stairs like this while alone when you were very small. You've always held your hands still when someone is close. Decide it's okay to eat oatmeal 5 times in 2 days. When you worry that that's weird, remind yourself that normal is a scratchy, intolerable fabric to pull on, and it never fits anyway. Thank you all for being here. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to introduce our last poet of this evening, Hailey Spencer. Hailey is, in the words of her wife, Elizabeth, an absolute cloud of a girl. She's obsessed with fairy tales and has an equally passionate rivalry with ants. She lives and writes in Seattle. For more on Hailey and her work, visit HaileySpencerWrites.com. Stories for When the Wolves Arrive is an academic and psychological exploration into the deeper themes of her best-known fairy tales, leaving no stone unturned in its examination of feminism, anti-capitalism, trauma, and healing. I'm happy to introduce Hailey now to read some of her work.
Hi, I'm Hailey. Thank you all for being here. I am excited to share this with you. The Maiden in the Tower. 1. A man promises his unborn daughter to a witch. He watches as the tower is erected. It ought to take 100 men a year, but when the witch touches the stones, they rise up to the heavens. 2. In her prison, she lets down her hair for the witch and a prince to climb. Sometimes when the witch arrives, the girl tries to say no. Later, when another begins his climb, she finally half desires to tug against her scalp. As he grows higher, strands of hair begin to pull painfully apart at the follicle. She saves them in a box beneath her pillow. 3. The witch, learning the truth, blinds the prince and exiles the girl. A desert in the middle of the woods, empty of anything to pray to except for the sky. The trees close in on all four sides. They look like home and feel like a pair of arms holding her tightly. It's hard to say whether this is an embrace or restraint. Her hair has been chopped unevenly, so she finishes the work, removing each strand from the root until her scalp is bare. 4. The couple is reunited. The maiden's tears restore the prince's sight. In the mornings, she wakes up with a head that is far too easy to lift. It would be wrong to say she misses the weight, so she doesn't. The Thorn. A maiden in a castle's haunted walls. Her footsteps make no noise against the dust. The beast moves slowly, shuffles, drags his claws. She still can see the fear in father's eyes when she agreed to take his punishment. Good girl, your father is so much obliged. And every evening in the dining room, the monster offers her a marble ring, and she begs for a final visit home. The beast relents. At home, the maiden sees a father with dark circles round his eyes. They fill with tears when she says just a week. Her sisters come with suckling pig and wine. They dance. Men's fingers brush against her skin. As days roll by, she loses track of time. Until one night she dreams of matted fur, wrapped up in water, drowning in the moat. She wakes, and to the castle she returns. His body lies there, swollen on the grass. She falls upon her knees, begs him to live, and promises she'll marry him at last. The beast leaps to his feet. He starts to change. His horns fall out. His fur comes off in clumps. He goes to tell the servants they're engaged. Left in the garden, she picks up a rose. Its thorn stabs quickly, leaving her to wince. She hadn't guessed the beast would be a prince. She blinks, just once, and it has decomposed. Contrary, backwards, inside out. Kill your mother, says the mullah. Yes, says the girl. Make me your father's new wife. Yes, says the girl. Spin the pile of cotton. Yes, says the girl. Don't let it fall into the well. But the cotton falls into the well. Go into the well, says the yellow cow. Yes, says the girl. Salam the div nicely. Yes, says the girl. Find the wisp of cotton. Yes, says the girl. Come back home to me. The girl goes into the well. Come break my head, says the div. No, says the girl, and washes her hair. Break the water jars. No, says the girl, and fills them. Knock down my house. No, says the girl, and sweeps it. Take whatever treasure you desire. And she does. Seek out the wind. The polar bear said, Are you frightened? No, she wasn't. There was no road to the castle. You'll get there either too late or never at all. Yes, that could very well be true. He was so wild and furious. I once blew an aspen leaf there, if you're not afraid to go with me. She was not afraid, no matter what bad things might happen. They went far, so far that no one would believe how far they went. Are you frightened? Said the north wind. No, she said. She wasn't. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Hailey. All right, I'm going to add the rest of our authors to this spotlight here, and we'll get our conversation started.
All right. Thank you all so much for reading. It was so nice to hear that all together. And again, since we've been looking at it in editing forms. All right. So for our first question tonight, we're going to ask our authors, when crafting your collections, how did you exclaim or reclaim your beliefs and outlooks on the world? Anyone who wants to kick us off, just feel free to jump in.
I'll start. So to me, every act of creating is a political art. An artist chooses to be an artist because they have to say something. And only by that, it means that they have something to say that is reclaiming to me or exclaiming. So I think no matter what you write, or even if you just paint flowers, or, you know, to me, this is an act of reclaiming.
Yeah, I think that, writing, while it is like an act of creation, it can also be viewed as, a therapeutic technique that works for some people to write thoughts onto a page so you can like sort through what you truly believe and vibe with, and then also pick out like which things are cognitive distortions or like things that a past you believed or anything like that. And like, to be clear, I'm not saying writing replaces therapy at all, but like I feel like writing has really helped me understand and sort out what I think about the world. Like I chose poems about autism tonight, and I grew up with a lot of ableism in my home, and writing has kind of helped me sort out what I really think about everything and myself and all that.
I really, really love that, Xylo. I agree. I also think too, especially when we're dealing with issues of trauma, I feel like writing, like you said, is this amazing way that we can re-understand or relearn how we exist in the world as people who have now gone through trauma, because trauma changes everything. It changes how we see ourselves. It changes how we see the world. It changes how we see ourselves in the world. And I know for my own experience working on this collection, writing these poems really did help me to reconnect to a body that I had pretty intentionally disconnected from, because that was where the trauma occurred, was in my body. So my body became kind of this unsafe space. And so writing this collection really allowed me to examine like the details of my body, my mind, my soul, my heart, and reconnect those things. So for me, this piece, this collection really has been an act of just reclaiming myself.
I really connect with that, which is interesting because I know my collection is a little bit different in that all of the poems are written about characters who are not me. They're written about characters from fairy tales. But for me, the process of writing almost felt like the process of mapping, in that there are a lot of times in my life when I feel like I don't understand my path forward or where I am in my story. And fairy tales are something I've always really deeply resonated with. So for me, the act of reading so many fairy tales and learning these stories really deeply and learning them in different ways and different versions, and then writing them in a way that, the course of my book is a map through trauma to healing, and really mapping out the different ways these characters do that, but within a wider narrative, I feel like really did help me understand myself and my beliefs of the world a lot better.
It's super interesting because when I write, I don't feel like I am trying to say something specific. I feel like whether I want it or not, my worldviews slide into my writing naturally. And sometimes when I reread things that I write, I'm super surprised because I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I think. This is what I believe, even though I did not plan to say it or tell it to the paper or to the, potential reader.
I really feel that, Ahuva. One of the most interesting experiences for me a couple years back when working on this collection was when I had worked on the Beauty and the Beast poems and I had set them aside for a little while. And then I came back to them after a breakup that was really like kind of a transformative moment in my life. And I saw how much I had this character who was sacrificing herself and everything she needed to be this idea. In terms of how I read the character, this idea of like this good girl who always takes care of others. And there was so much of my own life and my own feelings at that time in my life embedded into those poems without me having actually realized that that was something I was going through until afterward when I looked back on them.
Isn't that just so magical?
It is.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how with writing, sometimes like you and your story are very separate from the material. Like I think of like people who write fiction, and while I don't write fiction at all, I admire them and wish I could, and like I don't know, I feel like it depends on the writer and where they are at with how distant they are from their writing. Like but I've also wondered, like, is it based on what the story needs? Like it kind of feels like to the writer, or is it based on what the writer needs in that moment?
I feel like it starts with my own need when I start to write something, but then it slowly moves into what the story needs. And I find out that even if I have to make up things or lie or just reorganize the whole story, because the story becomes bigger than my own thing. And that takes me to also the purpose of and I feel like I do not wish to pass a message or like, tell how things should be. It's more about, I want to believe that once I put my own experience, it transforms naturally into a more kind of like a global, all human kind of like experience. Because at the end of the day, we all experience the same things. It's like food. It's limited. It's all about how you cook the ingredients. So it's all about how you present the same idea that we all share and how we form them. So I feel like at some point there's a shift between my own experience, and I always hope to get to that point when I shift from my own experience to a more kind of like wider picture that can everyone hopefully relate to.
Well, Ahuva, I think that really comes across in your work, in the stories of yours that I read when reading your collection. I really see some of that. And I would say, adding on to that, I think that the best of any kind of writing where you are not the speaker is the juncture where the lie becomes the truth, where the story you're telling, like on the outside, may not be a true story, but there's something inside the story that is a deeper truth than you can get to by being straightforward. It's like by taking the roundabout path, you actually get there in a way that feels more real and more clear than if you had just said it straight out.
Like a dream in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think about Riley, your book that is so specific about a very specific experience. In first read, you think, oh, this is just about one theme. But then when you dive in, you actually you find out that it talks about grief or trauma in such a wider way. So even though the words are specific to one experience, it is so much wider than what it is, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I heard a poet call that the great paradox, where like the more specific you get with something you're saying, the more relatable it can be. Like saying I had a rough time in school is a lot less relatable than being like, yeah, every lunch I ate my food in the nurse's office or something like that.
I think that's a really good point, Xylo, too, because I think this was something in my own writing journey that was really difficult. It felt that if I kept it broad, more people would relate to it. But broadness doesn't actually land in anything truthful. It doesn't land in anything visceral. It doesn't land in anything translatable. And the more specific we can be, the more those connections are made, because even if it's not that, you know, they relate to eating their lunch in the nurse's office, that very detail could link to something else. One of my writing professors called that nesting. And the way he taught writing was like, okay, look in this memory and see how many things are nested in this memory. Write the things that are really obvious right off the bat, and then link those things to other memories. And it's incredible, the web of memory that makes, and how things can just connect that seemingly are just disconnected and not related at all, which I think is really wonderful. Like kind of like what you were saying, Hailey, about the breakup and the Beauty and the Beast poems, and how, you know, you wrote the poems and didn't write them with intending to reference a breakup, and then you went and reread them later and you know, oh my God, these are related to, these connect to an experience that I've gone through.
It's true. It's like telling a lie. They always tell you, stay to the core of the story and then just move aside, add some false information, but you have to have a true core. So it is kind of like that. You have your core story, but then you add layers, but the core is always there, right? It's always like your own very specific, authentic story.
I'm thinking about that Emily Dickinson quote, tell the truth, but tell it slant.
Yes. And that's the exclaiming or reclaiming of our beliefs, right? Mm-hmm. Like that true core, that's where that exclamation happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's like method acting in a way, where you like draw upon an event that's actually happened in your life and like funnel it into the story.
Absolutely.
And to play the devil's advocate, I think when I think about the word storytelling, I feel like it goes away from the personal, and it's almost like we writers or storytellers, it assumes that there is some responsibility to give something to the audience that they can relate to, regardless to what we believe or what we experienced. And I think it's a great way to approach a wider, unconnected crowd. You know, it can be anyone can relate to it. When it's a good storytelling, it's so universal and so wide that so many people can relate and find themselves in there.
Mm-hmm. This gets me really excited just thinking about fairy tales and the way that folklore has been transmitted across different cultures through different people. And that's something that I've always been really drawn to about the fairy tale and the folk tale. But I think beyond that too, there's just this importance to the fact that storytelling is always a collaboration between the storyteller and the audience. I think poetry sees that really well. And I think folklore sees that really well. I think that sometimes in fiction writing, we forget that collaboration. So I think that just ties in really nicely to all of this. Like, it's not just about the me who is telling the story, but it's also about the relationship between me and the person hearing the story. And it's also about the person who's hearing the story's own journey and what they get out of the story. And so there's this kind of triangulation. It creates a whole different story once you are sharing it with somebody than if it's in isolation by yourself.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. Like the idea of it being collaboration. Though I feel like that also means the writer as like the person who is, I don't know, in charge of what's happening, has like a responsibility to lead the people back out of whatever story or darkness is happening, you know, like, you can't just like be like, okay, you love these characters, now they're all gonna die. Like you have to, I think an element of a good story is that it ends in a place you feel it's complete, you know?
Well, I know my experience in my collection, the final part of the collection was added much later than the rest of the collection. And that's part of what wasn't working about it at first, was that I ended still embedded in the trauma narrative. And the final section of my book, The Journey Home, is all about actually like completing that cycle of trauma and healing. And I think you're absolutely right, Xyla, when it like, in the case of my book, like when it didn't have that, it wasn't a complete story and it wasn't doing what it needed to. It wasn't doing its responsibility to the reader to lead them back out.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that earlier today, like when I was thinking about all this conversation. I was looking at the last poem of your book, and it ends in such like a perfect contemplative place for the book. I have it up if it's okay. I can read the last like 2 lines.
I would love that.
Okay. In the morning, she glances at her reflection, where a coronet of vines has begun to form against the ripples of her hair. Like, it's so graceful, you know?
Well, I love that too, because like, I think so often, especially when we're dealing with trauma, our impulse is to look inward. And that's, I think, a good thing we should be. But I think the point of writing is to take what's inward and reflect it outward.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love this idea of like the coronet with the light and the hair, because it's literally radiating out. It's extending out from the self towards others. And I really, really love that. So many metaphors in your book, Hailey. I love it so much.
Thank you.
I'm also obsessed with fairy tales, so there's that too.
Which reminds me, our first workshop together, and how I thought, oh my God, our writing is so different. And then we ended up like 3 of us writing about a dog, like a beast, a dog. I don't know if you remember that. And I thought, you know, oh my God, this is not a coincidence. It's so archetypical, like fairy tales, that we chew the same images in our minds, and we somehow the world brings. It was just so amazing how we all chose a text. Not all, 3 of us chose a text that contains the same kind of beastie dog, and I was blown away. It was so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think part of the brilliance of this cohort with this set of books is that they are all so different stylistically, and they're all about such different things. But when you read them, they do feel like they go together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in awe of that.
I agree with that. It almost feels like different characters within our stories are interacting with other characters from each other's. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it gives me goosebumps.
I hate to interrupt you all, but I do have a question I would love selfishly to be answered. Did you learn anything about yourself or your craft that came as a surprise while you were forming or editing your collection? And if so, what was it?
I learned throughout this process that I like rhyme and form poetry a lot more than I expected to. When I was originally crafting this, I knew that I needed some poems that just tell the story so that readers who are coming into this not knowing some of these fairy tales have a map. And so I decided to do that primarily in verse forms and try and do a different verse form for each one. And I actually found that I loved it in a way that was a little surprising to me, partially just because I feel like form is not, like, it's not quite in vogue, especially certain really structured rhyming forms are not particularly in vogue. But with those constraints, I found that my content got really interesting and I ended up having to do things that surprised me. And I just enjoyed it a lot. And I enjoyed the way it sounded.
I love that too, Hailey, because for me, like reading a lot of your poems, it was those form poems, the rhyme that really sucked me into the content and kind of reminded me of the original fairy tales, which is just so masterful. I really love that.
Thank you.
I think to me, what was surprising the most was how easily I'm happy to edit and change my text, and how important this community or communal work was and it is to me. And I just loved doing that. I just loved finding out that I'm not attached to the text, knowing, especially being bilingual and English not being my first language. It was such a learning process for me to be able to let go and say, yes, there is a way to say things better or sharper or in a more concise way, or how can I shrink my text to be more exact and more to the point. And I was just really appreciative, and I'm still, about having this whole cohort and such a large group of editors that like keep seeing your text and keep seeing it changes all the time. Mm-hmm. It's a lovely process.
I relate to that, Ahuva. Because poetry is a relatively new genre for me to be writing in. I was worried about how the process of revision and workshop would go. And even though I've been in workshops for years through college and stuff, but never in this kind of context. And so being willing to receive feedback, being willing to receive other people's reception of my work was something I was worried I would struggle with. And I think I did in the beginning. But everyone is so supportive in this press and have such unique insight to little things and big things that I would not have thought of on my own. And the workshops were absolutely priceless for me. They really, really helped. And that surprised me because I can be really defensive and possessive of my work. So, finding that I really could receive that feedback without jumping to the conclusion that I was a terrible poet was very surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. When I first heard about the workshop format, I was like, wow, like how they're set up for any audience members who are viewing, is the poet reads the poem out loud, and then everyone thinks about it for a bit and makes their notes on it. And then we come back together, and the poet cannot say anything while all the editors are giving their opinions and like edits, and then can say something at the very end. And I heard that and it was like, can't say anything. What if what if I feel like it's being misinterpreted, or like that it's being torn up, But all the editors and like cohort members at press have just been like so like understanding and careful with everyone's work in all the ways it needs, and then also like so constructive in the ways that it also needs. which has been really cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially cool considering how different of writers we are.
Definitely.
Because I know sometimes when there's people with lots of different ideas about like what makes a good poem, it's easy to have your own biases get in there and be like, well, I don't think the poem should be like this because that's just not what I like in poetry. And I feel like everybody was really able to hear what the others were doing and look at it as what it was and go from there rather than trying to make it into the kind of poem we would have written.
Absolutely.
And also learning from each other's manuscripts, right? Like not just giving feedback, but also getting the feedback from just reading other texts in the same context or the same frame.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that process too of being able to look at other people's manuscripts and give feedback allowed the distance to be critical with my own work and to be more receptive to the feedback I was given, because it allowed me to see like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing piece by another person in our cohort. It just needs a little tweaking. That doesn't mean that the poem doesn't have value. It doesn't mean that it's not well written. It just needs some tweaking. And it allowed me to then take that and apply it to myself. Darn those insecurities. So I definitely appreciate all y'all.
Yes, I want to thank you, Hailey, for suggesting to break my main big story into three parts. This changed my whole structure of the book. And when we read the comment, I'm like, yeah, that's what it needs to be. It's like, and then we just rearranged the whole, all the text around this one story, and it made it so much better.
Oh, I love to hear that, Ahuva. And I'm especially happy because the stage at which I got your manuscript, you and Ash were saying that the big thing you wanted feedback on was just like the structure of the manuscript. And structure is just something I love to tweak and play around with. So I was just like, this is a match made in heaven. Like, love all these stories and poems. Just how can we arrange them so that they all really stand out against each other? So I am very excited to read your completed book. I think it's going to be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, friends, I think we're getting close to time, which is a little bit sad because I'm enjoying this so much, but also we have 2 more of these, so that's very exciting. So we'll take a couple minutes here. If there's anything you guys have popping around your heads that you want to offer into this space that'll make this conversation feel more complete, I'll invite you to do that now.
I love you all. That's how I feel right now. So.
Yeah. Just making sure we're all like swapping books, right?
Right, exactly.
And also meet in person. That would be nice to physically see you all. That'd be really amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
Lots of hugs or fist bumps or whatever forms of affection people like. Or high fives or no touch, whatever.
Definitely.
Yeah, it has just been such a blessing to get to know all of you. And I'm honored to be with such creative, interesting people.
100%. Same.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you, Ash and Emily and Lauren and Caroline, who I know isn't here. Y'all are seriously the best editors that any poet could ask for.
100% agree. I felt just so loved and held and supported by this community. Everything I could have wanted from this.
Absolutely.
So delicious. I think we should just, get poets in a room and listen to them talk all the time. All right, I'm gonna just share a last slide to close us out here. If I can find it, there it is. So just letting folks know that these books that we've been talking about are coming out in September, but you will be able to pre-order them beginning July 15th. So you can watch the First Matter Press website to see more information on that. And all of your pre-orders go directly to supporting the authors as they move their book out into the world. So we really appreciate that and encourage you to pick up a book or two if you're curious about what they've been talking about. And then we'll be back here again at the end of July and end of August for our next two Convos in Cohort. We'll be focusing more deeply on the language and expression of trauma, which the authors kind of got around a little bit today, but we'll dive a little bit more into that for the July session. And then in August, we'll switch to a little bit more of a craft lens and take a look at what the authors feel are the essential differences between poetry and prose, which should get interesting because we have quite a bit of hybrid work happening throughout the manuscripts. So that should be a pretty cool conversation. I think that's all we got for you today. I hope everyone goes well into their evenings, and we hope to see you back for our next Convos and Cohort.